Big Dumb Gaming taking on Team Omegasniped. Upper Karazhan is the map of the series. Let's get going.
Oh, I'm excited. We have Big Dumb Gaming and Big Dumb Rich here.
I'm not that big.
That's true, Rich. I love it. You're fun size. Getting this dungeon right away, Rich. We're probably going to see those two spirits skipped right away as we do see that mass stealth come up immediately. And then we'll see that controls undead at the top of the ramp from the Blood Decay, carrying it over to those two constructs and just getting as much efficient cleave as they can.
Efficiency is going to be the name of the game here. And we see this in kind of both the Karazhans, just trying to be efficient. Usually that first mob is just not going to be one that's near anything else. It's big. It's got a stupid health pool, so just grab it, control it, get that added perk of having it. But right now, we're only going to see them pull these first two constructs. After that is when we kind of see that big pull come in a lot of the time, pulling all the way into that boss room. They deal with these constructs without too much of a problem. Is there anything that can be really scary here for the teams, Ted?
I mean, not really. As long as they're kind of pulling it to the side like we're seeing on the stairs, they can avoid a lot of that static void zones on the ground. The big deal here will be how well they deal with the nullifier buff coming in as we see BDG start to do that. The nullification buff will spawn in the same spot in this room every time, which is why you're seeing players keep it here. But it also has the added perk in this volcanic setting of you can pull the entire room. Who cares what orbs they spawn on the other side? You're line of sighting them anyway, and then you're getting that debuff on one of the players, getting that 100% damage increase, and then just nuking all of the trash in front of Curator down. Seeing both teams do that. Big pull coming over here on Team Omegasniped on the right side.
Looking at these compositions is pretty interesting too. Keep in mind with the current rule set, we are going to see if you lock in a class, that is the class that you are using for the entire series. You know what else is interesting? Dying. And it just looks like everyone on the team of Big Dumb Gaming is trying to be very interesting right now. That's going to be 5 deaths in their pockets. And this was what we were talking about with the danger of the pulls.
Yeah, and you know, you're about to finish your thought there.
Yikes.
And you know, we'll finish that thought in a sec, because I did want to comment on their compositions as well. But the problem here that we failed to talk about last series too, because I just get lost in Jack's beautiful eyes, is that we do have this raging affix right now. And yours,
I don't do it for you.
No, yours are exceptional with those spectacles as well. And you're making quite the spectacle of the situation. But the big thing we need to talk about right now with these wipes is mismanagement of orbs, mismanagement of interrupts on those arcane volleys coming in from the larger elementals in combination with the raging affix. The raging affix, of course, increasing the damage of trash mobs by 100% when they reach the 30% health mark. You did see that both wipes came in as we had some of those larger elementals below that threshold, hitting for that obscenely higher amount of extra damage, Rich.
Yeah, before those 10 deaths came in and kind of derailed our train of thought, we were talking about the compositions. Let's bring that up one more time. In the current rule set, in case you're watching for the first time or you don't pay attention to the rules like me, you little law benders out there, we do have a situation where everybody, when they lock in their class, they are going to be playing it for the entirety of the series. They can change their spec, but they're going to be playing that class. And it is interesting to see players like Xyronic that we think of as a Warlock. He's deciding to play Monk not only in this dungeon, but for this entire map pool. So it is cool to see that little bit of flexibility. Obviously, we have seen Luffy on the Druid, but we are going to see 2 Resto Druids here in a meta that has been slightly more on the side of Holy Paladin.
Yeah, certainly, but we're seeing a lot more use of Resto Druids in this NA region compared to the other 3.
Definitely.
Not shocked to see the Resto Druids so much, especially, of course, the Blood DK. We see them pretty much every match. We've only seen 1 non-Blood DK the entire tournament across the 4 weeks so far. But interesting to note that both teams...
Demon Hunter, right?
Yeah, it was a Demon Hunter, absolutely right. It is important to know that both teams opting to use an entirely melee composition between all of them. So, you know, it's something that, you know, is nice for this map. Does provide advantages on Shade of Medivh as an example. A lot of extra time on interrupts because of their 15-second cooldown on those interrupts instead of some of the higher ones or non-existent ones for some of the ranged. But it's going to be interesting to see moving into the next dungeons how this will affect them. Nonetheless, Curator has been pulled over on both sides, reaching around that 80% mark. Pretty close between both of them as they did both have that full wipe. Similar strategy coming, of course, one moving clockwise, one moving counterclockwise for those static zones on the ground, Rich.
Yeah, and if you stand in those, they are going to have shocking results. You got to make sure that you get out of that. I thought that was Rob. It scared me so much. Like, we got the host involved here. That's when you know you really messed up. But you can see, don't want to be standing in that. They're going to go ahead and pop their Lust right now on both sides, and the main thing is you want to get full uptime on the Lust, but you also want that Lust to be lining up with the evocation that Curator is going to do, and you can see that's happening on the left side of your screen for Big Dumb Gaming. While the Curator is in that evocation phase, going to be taking a massive amount of increased damage, so having full Lust time during that is going to result in just melting this boss, and that's why you can see Big Dumb Gaming already getting to that 30% mark, even though they pulled at a relatively similar time to Omegasniped, and now they're going to be able to put it right right down to the floor, full speed ahead, and they catch up in this evocation phase on the side of Omegasniped.
I mean, the two teams almost working in robotic synchronicity between the two of them. They pop that Bloodlust at the exact same second. Now, on Team Omegasniped, they did pop it a bit too early. The evocation phase lasts 12 seconds, and they only had about 16, 17 seconds of that Bloodlust uptime going into it. I'm sure they probably know this and tried to line it with their CDs better, getting the net amount of damage out, but their burst was higher, of course, than BDG's, as we see Curator dropping lower after that burn phase than does BDG, who started with a 4% advantage on the boss, having pulled Curator slightly earlier. It's just really the strength of that burst damage coming out of those monks. I mean, just look at the damage meters right now, all green in the top. Curator at 8%, 10% over on BDG's side. They will be both kind of dragging it towards the exit. Love to see this, saving those few precious seconds for the less mobile classes. You're already ready to exit the room as soon as that boss falls.
And the other thing that you need to know, yeah, is exactly that. You want to be paying attention to the space. You want to use every single second, and you can see right now, especially a concerted effort on the side of Omegasniped, just trying to get right up into that portal, and down the wormhole they will go. It takes just a few extra seconds for Big Dumb Gaming to get sucked on into that vortex. Now, one thing that I do want to note as well, yes, there isn't a crazy amount of trash here. It's pretty easy to skip everything that you do need to skip, but having these rogues later on both sides is going to be very valuable for the skipping potential that it will have. But that is going to be something both teams have in their arsenals. After those first fluky deaths, though, Ted, where do you expect things to go wrong again, if anywhere? Where are the big pressure points? Because this is quite a difficult boss.
I feel like this is kind of a trap question, Rich. Maybe nothing will go wrong at all in the rest of the dungeon, but I mean, we've seen Medivh, we saw it in the previous series. Any small hiccup can really just end any team's life here right now. You know, not DPSing the Guardians properly, messing up your Flame Wreath. A lot of things can come out of it. BDG getting a bit slower to the boss on account that they decided to actually kill some of the trash on that upper platform, which is why you see the 56% on them versus Team Omegasniped's 47. So all that advantage going later into the dungeon, but at this moment, all eyes on Team Omegasniped, as they will soon be moving into that first Guardian phase. We do know that the special phases on Medivh are, of course, predetermined. Guardian followed by Flame Wreath.
I got all four of my eyes on them right now as we go into that bigger screen for Team Omegasniped. And it is really interesting. One of the big trends that we have seen is, especially it happened for Limit, I feel like they were the guild that used it the most, it is that Agrimar's Trinket. Obviously, Prydos was very popular in the first MDI. That's going to be a legendary, which gives you a little bit of extra defensive utility, as we do see these Guardian images come out. They're going to go for the strategy where they actually do a little bit of split damage. They're focusing down that one, but you can see over on that other Guardian's image is going to be their tank. Now they're moving over. Now they're going to finish that up, and you may notice you don't see one of the monks. That's because he's going to be on the other side of your screen, wailing on that birdie, plucking the feathers clean out of it. But the Agrimar's Trinket has been really interesting because it's not going to take away from the perks of a legendary, and it is very targeted, not only for constant uptime of a defensive shield, but it's going to be like, okay, right now, we need to get out of jail free card. Let's put on that Agrimar shield. And I'm curious to see if we actually see the monks equipping that item here to deal with something like Flame Wreath.
Yeah, I mean, the Agrimar's Trinket has passive master on it with that 2-minute cooldown that gives you a huge absorb. I mean, we're talking 20 to 25 mil, so a huge amount of damage. You'll see a kind of strategy where teams implement on this boss. They know the Flame Wreath is coming on a timer. Of course, Medivh does cast it, and everybody kind of stacks up, pops that trinket, and forces the explosion on that Flame Wreath to pretty much just negate the mechanic entirely. The downside being, of course, here's the Flame Wreath right now. So we actually see them dealing with the mechanic traditionally, just kind of spreading out, making sure nobody clips the lines together, and of course healing those targets. If any of those targets die during this Flame Wreath, it's absolutely catastrophic, excuse me. It will explode and pretty much kill the entire group, seeing Flame Wreath on the left side of the screen as well with BDG.
Some of the highest wipe potential, really, for a mechanic on this boss, indeed. Team Omegasniped pulling ahead just a little bit here. They got that jump. They make it through the Flame Wreath. We still have to see, will Big Dumb Gaming be able to make it through that mechanic? And it looks like they will walk through the fire unscathed. And now it's just time to go for a little skip salute. It's getting cold in here.
I mean, they're jumping up and down right now, making sure that they don't get too many stacks from that Ceaseless Winter. Shade of Medivh does fall for Team Omegasniped, so not too much concern for them. They head over immediately to that kind of Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole, if you will. BDG now at 4% on Medivh, really not very far behind considering they spent that extra time pulling that trash upstairs, so they'll have that advantage later, being able to skip a couple of those mobs. But we'll see if it's really much of an advantage, because a lot of the teams tend to kind of efficiently kill some of the trash while the chess event finishes and that RP's coming up.
That's a big thing. We also know after the Mana Devour, there is potential to pull very large, but with these particular affixes, as you noted earlier, some of those big pulls can get deadly quickly. All of a sudden, you got all these explosives to deal with. You can have the ads getting buffed at the end of their life cycle. So it is something to think about, that maybe you're not just going to pull all of those little mana worms and pluck those suckers down. So Team Omegasniped is going to have to find that trash. Will it be efficiently after the chess event? Will they go for some bigger pulls after this next boss? But before they do that, they are going to have to deal with this next boss. And I actually feel like this is the boss where we have seen the most wipes in this dungeon throughout these MDI weekends. I think we've seen quite a few teams just dying to this guy.
Yeah, I would say between this and Shade of a D for sure. Now, both teams do have a nice advantage here. They have, of course, the Blood DK tank, what a shock, having access to that anti-magic shell every minute, so they'll be able to deal with the mana orb soaks kind of every other wave, 1, 3, 5, etc. But then you also have the Rogue with access to that Cloak of Shadows, being able to pre-immune and soak the orbs as well. For those of whom, of course, what will happen usually from the teams, as we're seeing Team Omegasniped do it already, is they will pull the boss to the corner, cutting off 3/4 of the angle that the boss can spawn these orbs in. The remaining 90 degrees can be absorbed by the tank. A couple can even leak in the boss, or even anybody else can take a stack or two. But the majority of the orbs will filter on top of the boss right in the center of that hitbox. So what you're going to see right away as soon as those spawn is likely the DK tank pre-popping anti-magic shells to not accrue any of the stacks and jumping up and down in the middle of the boss, as we're seeing right there, making sure he soaks all of them, and then any excess ones will be dumped off in these kind of void tornadoes, Rich.
And that's exactly, you can see it on your screen very clearly there when the orbs did go out. That's why that positioning works so well. And now taking a peek on Big Dumb Gaming side, just a few seconds behind, the orb's going to be going out, and then very quickly they are able to grab all of them.
Oh sorry, no, I just saw a spider. There is actually a spider up for Team Omegasniped right now. They decided to pull it over with the Mana Devourer and DPS it down. So there's 5% of the trash that they needed to make up right now. I know it was quite spooky, Rich.
You scared me quite a bit there. And one of the things I actually thought it was, I thought that was the Blood DK's health bar when you started pointing at it. And I was like, what is going on? But ultimately, yeah, look, they catch up in a big way in the trash department. And we talk about getting these efficient trash pulls. You know what? You already got a big baddie that you're dealing with. Pull one more over. Obviously, there is that associated risk, but now up to 52%, just trailing by 4% from Big Dumb Gaming. And they are just a tick, just a tad ahead on the Mana Devourer's health.
We're getting the next wave zone coming in for Team Omegasniped. Now, a bit of an unfortunate spawn with that swirly there. It actually spawned right on the boss's hitbox as the mana orbs were coming down. Somebody gonna have to go in there and eat it to the face anyways. But nonetheless, nobody dies. They still have access to their 2 battle reses. Don't even see a perk proc from the tank. Mana Devourer now at 7% on both sides. The DPS is matched so evenly here if you're looking across the damage meters. I mean, look at this, just 4%. Mana Devourer goes down first for Team Omegasniped. Seconds later for BDG. And now, Rich, we're getting into that the big memorable pull of the dungeon with all these smaller Mana Devourers. Some teams pull a kind of a 6 and then 9 formation. Some do a 15 formation. But it is one of those big dangerous pulls that we're talking about where you want to make sure that you babysit those orbs nonstop.
You just want to grab as many of them as you can. But as you mentioned, Affix is going to be very dangerous. Now we got to keep our eyes on that trash percentage to see where these guys are actually going to land. And the one DPS that was somewhat lacking, if you will, during that last fight was probably going to be that Demon Hunter. And you can see just how great the Demon Hunter is going to be on that pull. You get to run that current tier bonus. You get to run your legendary helmet, and all of a sudden you just press I-beam over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. It does massive amounts of
I certainly would like to thank the Rogues for coming out and attempting to get some DPS on that AoE pack, but unfortunately it was all about the Demon Hunter and the 3 Windwalkers there. They do use the mass stealth, as we said earlier, to get right up that ramp into the chess event. Now, a bit of a difference here with exactly what we talked about earlier. BDG will finish the remaining 6% with this chess event, and then we'll just kind of sit around waiting for the RP to stop, whilst Team Omegasniped will get to 97, because we saw it was 8%, 97%, and then during the RP of the bridge and the opening of the door to Vizidum, they're kind of backtrack for a second and then grab 2 of those bats. But we do see a death coming on the board for DBZ.
And that could be massive with how close these teams are. Every death going to be an additional 5 seconds. And what we are going to see with that pool that you did mention is the healer will run ahead, get that triggered, get the RP started while that trash is getting down, and everybody will be able to run down as soon as Vizidum is active. But let's pay attention to our chess event. As you can see, the king is going to be vulnerable right now. Every single time that you bring down one of these ads, it will make the king vulnerable. When he gets out of that vulnerability, he basically has a divine shield on until he gets to that 30% threshold. So they're doing their best right now to try to get into that 30% threshold while effectively cleaving. And Salute,
another death coming over Team Omegasniped on the side of Team Omegasniped this side. They do down the king. BDG now working towards that 30% on the king. Now, as a king, you're often used to seeing a much larger army, but usually kings keep their armies in their sleeveys, Rich.
Armies in their...
I'll let you think about that one. King going down now for BDG as well. They finished their last 100%, and Omegasniped, as we said earlier.
Oh.
Omegasniped moves outside of the room, grabs the 2 remaining bats, while the healer, Luffy, of course, does move up and start the RP for Vizdoom.
All right, our armies and their sleeveys. So I think the note here also is just the fact that how equal these teams really have been throughout this dungeon. We're going to get a little hype on Vizdoom because at the end of the day, we have seen just back and forth being equal on trash percentage for the most part, maybe a few percentage in between, being equal on boss fights, maybe a few percentage. Every time someone falls on one of these squads, their counterpart on the other team seems to fall. These two teams so equally matched here. This is an elimination match. The loser of this gets sent home. The winner going to play against the limit. This first map can be just so crucial. All of these teams locked in with a full melee DPS composition for the rest of this dungeon. How are they going to do here on Vizdoom? And we know that some of these mechanics can be difficult to look at.
Yeah, we already see the Chaos Orb going out on the Rogue there, runs off, cloaks it off or gets dispelled off, runs back in, making sure a lot of the melee. Now, this is where the melee is kind of a pain in the butt, right? You have everybody kind of stacked together the orbs, and when we get to the later platforms at 66 and 33%, you're going to have increasing amount of debuffs on the players. So unless they're always hitting the healer, it's going to be just not the most fun for the melee to have to move out, get dispelled, or wait for the explosion to go off and then move back in. Bit of damage lost on them. Now, Team Omegasniped started this boss well ahead, relatively, of course, of BDG. They were about 20% ahead, and BDG has pushed it a bit faster over to the first platform marker as well. So they're really catching up quite quickly. These teams are absolutely neck and neck, Rich.
One mechanic that we didn't mention, Sloot. Oh my goodness, cheat death. Yeah, this is actually going to be big. The cheat death getting procced on the rogue, going to be dangerous. We see Team Omegasniped is actually going to go ahead. They are going to use their lust nice and early. It's going to be on this platform right here, and you can see Vizdoom getting melted. One mechanic though, Sloot, that we did not mention. How should they be dealing with these balls?
Are you talking about the big purple balls or the green balls that spawn?
Big purple balls.
Okay, the big purple balls, you want to, I did mention it, you do want to either get dispelled, move off to the side, or use your own immunity, or you can wait for it to wear off. But in this all melee comp, you don't really want to wait for it to wear off because you're just losing so much time on the side of the platform. Importantly, though, is once you get dispelled, you kind of spiral out 8 of those purple balls from the platform that do quite a bit of damage to the players. So players need kind of that real estate to get rid of them or just move between them. Vizdoom now at 32% for Team Omegasniped, heading over to the last platform. BDG's falling slightly behind now.
This was absolutely insane. It was very important to bring up that mechanic, especially with this all melee comp. That's why we wanted to bring it up there. But that lust, they get full uptime on that platform. Now they're going over. Only 32% is going to be left. How will Big Dumb Gaming catch up? They still have that lust. They haven't used it yet. I'm assuming they're going to use it on this last platform, but is it going to be quick enough? These teams both have the same death count. It is going to come down to who brings this first unless someone makes a mistake. The rogue on the side of Big Dumb Gaming is going to be one of the most vulnerable targets. He does not have his cheat death, but 10% away is Team Omegasniped from closing out this game. We see Luffy get chunked for just a second. Going to be able to bring himself back up, and it looks like Team Omegasniped's going to be able to do it, Ted.
Yeah, I mean, just waiting for BDG to pop that Bloodlust at the last platform was just a bit of a mistake, unfortunately, because Team Omegasniped got so much uptime on their Bloodlust, and we know that that last platform is really maybe one of the easiest parts of the fight. The boss is stuck casting for the entirety of the, almost the entirety of the platform. By the time BDG even caught up, because they were slower on the second platform, which delays you more because of the mechanics and the real estate you have left, by the time they even got over to the boss to pop that Bloodlust, the boss was at 10% over for Team Omegasniped, and I think that was a bit of a miscall there. They should have used that Bloodlust on the second platform because you just waste so much time because of the real estate.
Another thing to note, only one team has the eyes of a demon to see the truth, to solve the mystery.
That's actually true, Rich, in this very convoluted way you're trying to express this fact. There is only one team with a Havoc Demon Hunter, and that is really important because that is a nice advantage coming in for the team. They'll be able to just get the 5 clues right away in that Guess Who game, target the demon right away with Spectral Sight, and start that process a lot earlier. So if Team Omegasniped's, powers of deduction aren't the greatest, if they're not, then they're going to lose a bit of time there.
It's going to be Zoinkies and lights out, potentially. We'll have to see. And if they can pull ahead early, that would be a very good look for them. As we did mention with the Grievous, though, those final 2 bosses, that's probably where the Grievous is going to be the most scary because of that just increasing damage that those bosses are going to do. That's when the healing is going to get the scariest, and then there's just a little bit of a, I wouldn't say a cherry on top because it's bad. It's like a
rotten cherry.
Rotten cherry on top. Ew, gross. You don't want that, especially if you're a healer like Luffy.
Yeah. Right. And now, for those at home, of course, Grievous does mean that any player that dips below 90% HP will get an increasing dot, stacking up to 5, and the only way to get rid of it is to re-heal that player above 90%. So, of course, combining with a lot of the dots on the bosses later could spell trouble. We'll see how it goes. Both teams, of course, immediately CCing, one sapping, one imprisoning these guards at the start. Just a huge time loss. No point dealing with them. And we're seeing that mess stealth come in right away from BDG as they head over to the bridge before Patrol Captain.
And also, Luffy and his crew are off of their boat, fresh off the Going Merry. They're going to get this first pull going. They instantly just take down that ad, and now we're going to see which way they go. And it looks like their tank actually does decide to kind of go that docks route. So how do you think they're actually going to be pulling this?
I don't know. We'll see. Often, what we've been seeing from these teams is actually that they deal with the docks with kind of that skip coming later on Talixay,
yeah, that's
and skipping that one Enforcer. So killing the docks early is
kind of, it's out
weird.
of the meta now. It doesn't seem like what they were doing. They were moving on over to the side, waiting for everything to be cleaned up. I was curious there because that really was, when we first got here, week number 1, that was really the strategy.
Popular strategy.
Yeah, and now that we do kind of see that new strategy, you get to deal with docks a little bit earlier. It is much more efficient. Heroism going to be popped right out of the gates for Big Dumb Gaming. They have already gone ahead and they have pulled that first boss, and the big mechanics here are going to be what's going down on the street.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I really like seeing how aggressive BDG is playing. They're a bit behind on Trash over Team Omegasniped, but they got right in there, and they popped the boss and popped that Bloodlust right away, even while Tree is still running around, getting rid of those towers. You don't want too many of these extra ads spawning on Gordo. They do cast that really annoying spell that stuns players for 5 seconds. And if you get stunned right in the middle of that kind of hourglass figure or the Street Sweeper here, you're just going to be swept away.
This is really probably the least scary boss, too, inside of this dungeon. So this is where you can kind of take risks. We've seen some teams decide to just pull a bunch of trash with the boss, and that seems to be the path that Team Omegasniped may go for. The other things that you can see is just aggressively getting there before maybe your healer is up there. Another thing to note is this captain is a little bit closer to getting swept away than you may assume from that health bar. Of course, everything is going to be completely equal here. Most of the frills are going to be turned off, if you will, but one thing is for sure, this captain is going to take his drink.
He is at 25%. He will have a swig of that now poisoned flask that every player and every team has access to. Of course, on live servers, that's a bit different. You need Herbalist, or I believe Alchemy, or being a rogue. But here, it doesn't matter. You just run over, poison the flask. Patrol Captain Gerdo does die at that 25% mark, as the players will then run off, getting ready for that backdoor strat, whilst usually the healer, especially in this case the Druid, they do have access to dash, will run up right away, starting the event, and either stealth, in this case stealth, they do have a Druid, or sometimes dies the Holy Paladin, respawning at the checkpoint at the back door, and then getting ready to do a lot of those dangerous pulls in the Court of Stars. Trina's there having a bit of a hop over the fence, doesn't want to accidentally pull that construct that's staying guard here to the entrance to the Spire. But, you know, Team Omegasniped falling a bit behind here. They're only at 55% on Gerdo. Granted, they do have an extra 14% worth of trash, but that's a pull that can pretty easily be made up in the Court of Stars, as there's a lot of these kind of, you know, the trash mobs that give a higher percent. So just pull an extra 1 or 2 on top of one of the mini bosses and you're set.
Yeah, Ted, this is one of the interesting things about this dungeon. We talk about how linear a dungeon is a lot of the time compared to how free-flowing it really is. This one is very free-flowing in a lot of ways. You don't need to pay quite as much attention to that trash percentage to discern which team is ahead. You more need to check off how many of these mini bosses have they gotten access to, how many of these big baddies have they dealt with, and then a smart team going to be able to pull over trash to those big check marks, to those big milestones, and deal with them very efficiently.
And we are seeing, understandably, as BDG's healer does stealth back, no point incurring that extra damage, but a huge chunk coming in on the group right there. We have Purgatory proc on Skulls. We have deaths going out for 2 of the players right there. Immediately res up at this. This is a really scary pull. I'm not sure about this one here. We're just having spot deaths. They're just throwing corpse, running this as much as possible. Jeebus does go down. We have a cheat death proc on the rogue. He now goes down. We've already had 2 deaths for Demon Hunter, 2 for the healer as well. Tank is proc Purgatory. This was like a really scary pull that perhaps really wasn't very necessary. Something I'm sure they practiced but did not work out for them. We just discussed with Rob at the beginning of this ridge how dangerous those Inquisitors are, and it's showing here. They're throwing everything they got at it, but they're just racking up the deaths, and now they're just going to have to concede this. 14 deaths on the board. Not really sure about that pull coming up. Team Omegasniped now more, you know, carefully moving up, doing a pretty dangerous pull themselves with the double Inquisitor too, but certainly nothing like we just saw, especially with the Constructs. Nobody likes pulling the Constructs. They have a huge amount of health, and if you miss an interrupt on them, especially with people dying, they're going to AoE heal everything around them for, I think, like 5% per second, something you don't want to deal with.
Luffy actually going to be taken down here, but besides that, Team Omegasniped going to be able to make it out unscathed. We saw that Big Dumb pull go a little bit rough for Big Dumb Gaming, especially for the team that was in the lead. They didn't need to go for anything that was that dramatic. Now Team Omegasniped is going to have their opportunity to start pulling ahead here, and the main thing that they need to be thinking about is how they're going to get to start dealing with these little mini bosses before they do get to that first boss. So keep track of how many each team has been able to get. There's an Inquisitor. That is going to be the next pull most likely for them, is that Inquisitor. It's a pretty good spawn right there, and they could probably pull some additional adds to it.
Yeah, I mean, they're getting ready to pull, I think, their first Enforcer, which is in the back left or top left here, depending on, you know, which orientation you're looking at as you kind of zone into this area. But far left is a good way to describe it here. They do pull the Enforcer alone, risking not to pull anything extra. We are in a fortified set. Yeah. These Enforcers just take so long to deal with. They have this AoE fell detonation, too, that players will often line of sight, as we saw there. You don't want that extra dot on top of it all. Once an Enforcer dies, it will strip Talixay, the second boss, of one of her generals. It'll run over to the location where the Enforcer died, and players will have access to it. Now, Amakatya, the very first one here, is really not that dangerous, so I wouldn't be surprised to see that one combined with either the next Enforcer or the Trash Rich.
Yeah, so I was a little surprised to see that Enforcer. Like you said, it does have a very big health pool. It took a long time. They were just single targeting that one down to actually pull out Amakatya, and there Amakatya does come to Katya. But the thing is they had those imps, they had those other pulls. Do you think that was out of respect for the Inquisitor and the rest of that pack, trying to avoid them? So they actually do pull that Enforcer by itself?
I mean, I really wouldn't be surprised. Keep in mind, they still have access to the Harbor. The Harbor is going to be a lot of percentage once they're doing that kind of trick, skipping the third Enforcer. I wouldn't be surprised if they just don't deal with that pull, period. Maybe it's just not part of their repertoire, part of their strategy to deal with in this dungeon. They're kind of pulling a, you know, 1 or 2 pack on the side with these mini bosses that aren't too dangerous. Just take a while to chew through. Want to add as much efficiency as you can, cleaving everything down. Yeah. BDG, of course, on the left side of the screen, still dealing with that bridge pull. Really not sure why they opted to kill that Construct, because right now it's just killing them, and it's dumping a huge amount of time that's needed, not to mention the 14 deaths on the board, an extra minute that they need to overcome in this dungeon.
For a group that was ahead, that risk just did not work out at all. If they were able to pull it off, they would have found themselves so far ahead. But this comes back to one of the core concepts that we have really seen emerging from this dungeon over and over again. It really has been the narrative of this dungeon. Taking risks like that on Trash does not seem to be the play. It really is going to be one of these dungeons where the strategy, Trash percentage is almost free. It's just making sure that you go about these Enforcers the right way, you go about these mini bosses the right way, you do it all efficiently, and then you just cross your T's, dot your I's when you get to the bosses.
Yeah, and I mean, for Team Omegasniped, you know, they're looking at BDG right now and they're saying Omega lull. I mean, they know that they're substantially ahead. They have that extra minute. They're already about to be working on their second mini boss. Amakatya only now going down for BDG. They're well ahead on Trash, but at this point, a minute ahead on Trash? I don't think so much, as Team Omegasniped is efficiently pulling a bit of extra Trash every time with one of the Enforcers, one of the mini bosses, and then we'll see a larger pull over at the Harbor. I would expect, at least, that that's what they're going to do, along with the Fellord, the third general of Talixay. But first, they're dealing now with this kind of eyeball mini boss. Now, this guy takes a while, because what happens is he will target one of the DPS or the tank with this kind of beam, and if the beam does connect with you, this disintegration beam, it will add 5 stacks to you that decrease your damage done by 5% per stack, so 25%. You can actually avoid it by pre-LOSing before the channel goes off, but you have to be really quick to do it.
Well, let's not be myopic here. Let's actually start to talk about what will be coming next, because this pull, we have seen it go wrong a few times. It is going to be very much in the meta, the one that we were trying to see. Are they going to do it? Are they going to go for that back pull towards the docks? How exactly does it work for anyone who hasn't seen it yet? How are they going to be able to deal with one of these Enforcers and get the rest of their Trash percentage?
I mean, if I was Team Omegasniped, you know, I would say I risk that. I want to go over and pull the boss as they're doing right now with Talixay. They're going to grab Talixay plus the general. Now, what happens is as soon as they get past that backdoor area, as we see there, the gate that had opened after the first boss died and the event was started, Talixay will despawn, but the Fellord general will not. So they kind of eliminate that whole speed, health, damage buff that they have, and then you safely pull the general with the combination of the Harbor, get a ton of Trash percent while, of course, efficiently cleaving this mini boss that isn't too dangerous. dangerous, just has a small shockwave, but you get a huge amount of cleave down.
You know, I was gonna turn a blind eye to it, to that pun, but I want to say it was quite cornea. But now they do have that back trash, but we can see the DPS getting chunked there, both Zyronic and Zongo for just a second, but Luffy able to get them back up and healthy without too much of a problem, gets rid of that Grievous stack, and now let's see how much percentage they can actually achieve from getting that back dox pull. And keep in mind, they are also going to have that mini boss, and like we said, they don't have to deal with the Enforcer because they pull it, they reset that boss, and that is why this strategy has become so very popular here in these later weeks of the MDI.
I mean, Reg, you know, I know you were kind of disappointed with those eye jokes, but I wouldn't bat an eyelash at it. Team Omegasniped finishing off the rest of this Harbor trash right now, as we mentioned, efficiently, along with let's just call him Team Shummalama Ding Dong over there, the second. They do finish off that Fellord right now, efficiently with the rest of that trash from the Harbor. Now, they are still missing a fair bit of percentage. They'll have to do one more pack. The percentage that BDG has made up with their 100% as they now move over towards Talixay, having dealt with the rest of their trash. Team Omegasniped still has 12% to make up, but they also have that 12 death advantage.
One pack? You sure it might not take Tupac?
I mean, we'll have to, you know, all eyes on this and see how it ends up right now.
Yeah, you know that regardless of how many packs you pull, sometimes they will be able to do biggie damage. How are they going to deal with it here, Ted?
I mean, with the amount of damage that goes out on these teams, it will really hypnotize me sometimes to see these Windwalkers at the top of the meters, but no shock with the kind of balancing that they have. I mean, they're just so supreme in these situations, and not to mention the Rogue on this Talixay boss right now. You're having those imps spawn about every 20 seconds. They get the extra single target damage out of those imps being alive, so as long as they're tended to well and babysat well with interrupts and CC, making sure they don't chain their fireballs onto one target and one-shotting them, the Rogues are going to benefit hugely from this, as we're seeing the Rogue on Team Omegasniped right now just rocketing up in damage.
It does hypnotize you, but we can see that the Rogue is going to get that juicy damage right now. But let's avert our attention back to the imps because they can be quite impactful in this fight. If a cast does go off from them, that is going to wreak absolute havoc. So you're going to need to actually get good control on them. You're going to have to use leg sweeps from the monks. You're going to have to use maybe those arcane torrents. You are really going to have to make sure that you have them under control, but the Rogue going to get to reap the benefits from that, going to create combo points off of those additional adds, sink those finishing moves into the primary target, which is going to be Flame Wreath. And the monks also can generate stacks in a similar way by tab targeting throughout, getting their primary abilities on, building up stacks, and then getting the spin to win.
I mean, let's leave the imps out of this. What's really impressive right now is that BDG was so behind with their trash, you know, having all that wipe. And right now, they're actually 12% ahead of the boss. So the advantage that they tried and unfortunately failed a couple of times to do, but now have really, you know, grabbed, is providing an advantage even now in form of 13 to 14% lead on the boss. Is that enough for 60 seconds difference? I mean, it's going to be a pretty close match by the end of it if Team Omegasniped continues to perform as flawlessly as they are. But they as well have the extra advantage of that Havoc Demon Hunter going into that Guess Who game.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say. Is yes, it's a minute, but they basically get this next little mini game for free. The mystery has already been solved. These detectives have already gotten to the end of the show. They know exactly who the culprit is going to be. They're going to instantly get all of these clues by going into that site. So there aren't many classes that are actually able to do it. One of them is, of course, going to be the Demon Hunter with that site, so you can actually jump in there. Going to get a really good view of how everything goes. Team Omegasniped is going to have to actually solve this mystery, and they need to do this trash pull. We see that both of these teams have gotten this boss down, so now it is all ready for Big Dumb Gaming to move on over to the big bad that they have pulled out, and this is going to get them the key to the final boss.
The problem is, don't forget, Team Omegasniped, like we mentioned, still has trash to make up right now, which they're doing right now. The 90%, they're finishing off the last of the trash that they need, while BDG's already moved upstairs, of course, found the evil infiltrating demon, Dreadlord, moving out to the balcony here, getting ready to DPS it down, spawned in a favorable location already on the top floor, and they'll be starting. The rest of this map for BDG right now is just sustained single target damage between this demon and, of course, Melandris coming up after the final boss of the dungeon. Team Omegasniped moving a bit slow now. I mean, they're already at they're only at 94%. They still need to run over all the way to the far side of the court just to pick up that extra impact with the Inquisitor.
This is kind of blunt, but this pathing is terrible for them. It takes Team Omegasniped so long to even just run to trash. That's going to waste quite a few seconds. And then we move back into Big Dumb Gaming's court, and you start asking yourself the question, because obviously this was their map pick, what if that pull worked? They're going to have a death, too, on the side of Team Omegasniped, but what if that pull worked? What if they didn't have those 14 deaths right now? They would be smoking them right now, and now we look at their screen, and they get to let out that resounding, "I've slain you, demon!" as we see the vial fall to the ground and crumble back to the the Twisting Nether, his soul, to live another day on the plane of demons.
Good Lord have mercy. Team Omegasniped at 98% right now. They still haven't finished their trash. They've had to pull 1 2-pack by themselves. Let's spare the jokes for a second. They've had to pull 1 2-pack by themselves, kill that. Run over on the far side where you usually start the court, kill the impact plus the infiltrator, got them to 98%. Zyronic died during that, that's an extra 5 seconds. They now had to move back across the opposite court near where Talixay is, pull the remaining 2-pack with the Succubus and the Inquisitor, finish that off for the 100%. Now they're finally heading back into the court to even find the infiltrator in the first place, while BDG is already starting on Melandris, the last boss of the dungeon. I mean, that pathing just did not work out for Team Omegasniped at all, and that honestly cost them the match because they got a blessing in the form of 14 deaths for BDG that they just never took advantage of.
You talk about Omegasniped needing to maybe go for a 2-pack now, but it seems like their play is going to have to be a Hail Mary if they do want to win this one. All eyes on Big Dumb Gaming, already inside of that massive cooldown. They're going to be using their Heroism or their Bloodlust, whatever you want to call it. They got it, and they're going to be doing big damage. Let's talk about the mechanics here.
It's actually probably neither. I think they used drums.
I think they did use drums there. It's a little late, but you can see that these basically copies of the boss are being put out. The healer going to be the one to move outside, trying to stack them up nice and close. We know that throughout this fight, we already mentioned the last 2 bosses in this dungeon are going to be doing increasing amounts of damage throughout the fight.
Yeah, you know, every image that spawns will add to the damage of that Slicing Maelstrom, which is really kind of the damage/healing check on the group. It does cap out at, I believe, 5 or 6, so eventually, as long as you're sustaining the healing through that, rotating that consumption for every other one, and likely the healer maybe using Cephas on this, getting the Dispels out on the Tornadoes, there should be enough healing and damage going out from the players. Jeebus does get quite low there. Keep in mind, we do have that Grievous Affix that we mentioned earlier, something you want to get out of immediately because that Slicing Maelstrom will definitely proc that on those players, but they're doing an excellent job right now. Oh, the Rogue does get clipped there by the Piercing Gale. Luckily, he does have access to that cheat death, which of course is not available for the rest of the fight now, but Melandra's dropping pretty rapidly, already at a 3rd health left here.
Weird thing to note about Rogues, and I actually was looking on the other side, so I didn't see if this is exactly why it did happen. When you do use death from above, sometimes on this fight, you will end up in a very bad area. Ultimately, either way, that cheat death is going to be procced, and this is the fight where we say Grievous is going to come into play just a little bit. It's where it can be scary. You want to try to keep the team topped. As you can see, just constant yo-yos going about all over your screen. It looks like middle school, just yo-yos everywhere. But Melandris about to go down here for our squad. It's just all on Tree to keep up this squad as they work on this final 20%.
And Team Omegasniped now getting started on Melandris, but, you know, they're going to need some absolute God mode DPS to overcome the... You know, they have an extra 55 seconds to kill the boss, but that's not going to be enough on this tyrannical 22 setting. We will see, though, I mean, BDG still hasn't killed Melandris. We're just entering that single-digit health left on the boss. Everyone's still healthy. We did have the cheat death proc, but that's not an extra 5 seconds on the clock. Melandris now getting off his last blade attack as he charges there, spawning that extra spirit, and 4% on Melandris. Team Omegasniped getting that Bloodlust up right away, already at 70% on Melandris, but they have 55 seconds to kill this boss right now as soon as Melandris dies for BDG, which is right now. So all eyes, as we already joked about, Rich, over on Team Omegasniped as the counter to either tying the series 1 apiece or them sweeping 2-0 starts.
You basically need to be doing more than a percentage a second at this point. I know I'm not very good at math, but this is definitely a difficult equation to solve here on this championship Sunday. We know how important this series is. If Team Omegasniped can manage to bring down Melandris in time, in this 30-second window, all of the sudden, they find themselves in a commanding position. They will move on to play against Limit. If they do lose here, it gets extended to a 3rd dungeon, and it looks like Melandris is going to hold on tough. This final boss making a stand here as Luffy gets chunked down, still needing to deal with that Grievous for everyone and not being able to get healthy. Finally, Luffy makes a stand, but already we find ourselves with only 2 seconds left, 35% for Melandris. It looks like this is going to be Big Dumb Gaming's dungeon.
Yikes.
Yeah, you can definitely tell who's been practicing their Court of Stars lately. I mean, that path from Team Omegasniped. You know the meme with the guy and he's like looking at the butterfly, like, I'm like, is this a dungeon path? That was not a good run though from Team Omegasniped as far as like navigating the map. And
I don't know what memes are.
Rich.
That's
Invitational tie series on our hands, goes to 3. Vault of the Wardens, Grievous.
Yeah, that's a very important thing to note, as Rob did just say, this is going to decide it. This is an elimination dungeon right here. The loser of this is, as Sloot likes to say, staying right where they are, staying at home.
I mean, they're going home, right upstairs to the fridge and having a snack of disappointment. Team Omegasniped and BDG, big pull coming up from them right away. We see that kind of pre-silence from the Blood Elf ratio coming up on that first pack. They do have those casters there, casting the Nightmares as well. Glaviana pulled. Really big pull coming out of both teams. I mean, they could have stopped at the stairwell at Glaviana, but they just decided to go the extra miles. We've seen from some teams. Big difference between the teams here is that Omegasniped has used their Bloodlust and BDG's opting to hold off of it.
Which could be a big reward for them. Cannot stress how important these first few pools are, as we are going to see the Rogue getting chunked down on Big Dumb Gaming's side, but Tree able to hold on, being that tree of life. I'm not actually using the talent, I'm just saying that for flavor. But you can see that this heroism on the side of Team Omegasniped is not going to be nearly as effective. The uptime that they have on it is not going to be long. This is a long dungeon though, so they're going to have more of them, but Big Dumb Gaming should be able to have maximum uptime on that massive cooldown, most likely when they do get to that first boss because of the length of the dungeon. You want to be cycling it as much as possible. Team Omegasniped, they're going to continue to pull some trash here. They are already at the 39% mark, but Big Dumb Gaming, I'm really liking this pull coming out from them so far. Yeah,
I mean, similar pulls coming out of both teams here. They're opting not to skip anything. Sometimes we see the Mass Stealth coming in on this pack that we were discussing earlier, that they're both DPSing right now. They choose to just get rid of most of the trash. I think they're gonna have something like 50 or 51% by the time they're done and adding access to Tirathon, the first boss. Somebody's already kind of snuck into the boss room, as you saw on the side, starting a lot of that RP, because there's a conversation that needs to take place. DBZ getting so low there on BDG, but not falling over. No deaths on either side right now, but there's that RP conversation that the first boss needs to have before they're able to come down. You can kind of hear it in the background here. Team Omegasniped now moves into the room. Boss perfectly prepared for them as they pull that not very dangerous 2-pack of trash with them and get ready to DPS the boss.
And this is something that we've been seeing more and more, actually getting that trash with the boss, because like you said, it's not super dangerous. It's going to give you that extra cleave. With their particular team composition as well, we noted the fact that ultimately these guys had locked in playing this full melee composition for the rest of this series, and this is going to be one of those instances where it is very strong if you get to pull those additional adds. We also do know that this boss is going to spawn some adds of its very own. You see the Rogue and the Monks going to be able to capitalize on that, get a little bit of extra damage, and we are going to see that Big Dumb Gaming is going to be able to do something similar with the Demon Hunter, but none of this is looking healthy on the side of the DPS for Team Omegasniped. You can see that they're getting chunked down constantly. The Rogue's cheat death has been procced a little bit earlier on, so they do have to be scared during this fight. Once again, massive damage coming out.
Yeah, they keep getting in front of that Sentinel, that Myrmidon, when it's shooting out its kind of AoE silence cone. I mean, being silenced as a melee, not the biggest deal in the world. The bigger deal is that it just does a ton of damage, combined with some of the pulsing damage that's going to start once Tirathon enters that Havoc form for both teams. We already see that being the case on Team Omegasniped. Starts pulsing that extra damage. Both teams now moving over to that phase. One of the nice advantages of that triple melee is, as this glaive chain is kind of moving around the center of the room, Rich, you're going to have the melee just be able to glue on the boss the entire time and not have to be displaced, losing some damage when that chain starts to run them over.
Oh yeah, it's so annoying if you are ranged. It really is. It's one of those mechanics where you do feel hamstringed. You're not going to be able to just sit there, be a turret, and cast. So having all melee here, definitely going to work out. We'll have to see if that is the case. I feel like this is a dungeon overall where having such a heavy melee comp really is good, and you can kind of see that the team's deciding to do that. I mean, Zyronic is one of the best Warlocks in the world. He's not playing Warlock for a reason. He's going to be on that Monk because it is good, not only for that first dungeon, but the entire pull, and you are seeing that strategy coming out from both teams. But Team Omegasniped is going to get that boss done. Just a little hair before Big Dumb Gaming is a beautiful hair indeed, as Team Omegasniped is already going to be engaging with the bald Foul Mother.
Yes, of course. I wouldn't know anything about a lot of the subject except the beautiful bald Foul Mother designed after your stepmother-in-law, as we discussed last time. Team Omegasniped moving in around the side. Both teams do a similar pull here, where we do have the Druid go over on one side in that bear form, pulls one side of the imps, DK pulls the other, combine it together in perfect harmony in the middle with the AoE grip right on top of that Foul Mother, cleaving everything down from the immense amount of cleave coming out of all the melee in the group, and the Foul Mother just melting on both sides. About to go down here for Team Omegasniped, after which they will prepare their Avalanche Potions, transforming into a fiery ball of death. that will not incur any fall damage when they try to jump down the elevator shaft. Hopefully they have favorable timing, though.
And you can see that they are able to bring down that Foul Mother before the cast of "You Don't Call Me Often Enough" goes off. But keep in mind, folks at home, Mother's Day coming up. Be sure to grab your mother something, whether it's an in-game token, some game time, but now time to take that elevator ride.
So we have, this is a really nice view here to paint the picture that both of these instances and the timing of them are exactly the same for both teams. As we saw, the elevator motion is the exact same for both teams, catching it at the top of the lift and riding it down together since they got there at the same time. So there's no RNG in terms of favoring or not favoring the team on either side if you get there at the same time. But Inquisitor Tormentum Ridge, not everybody's favorite boss in the world, does have 2 phases where he will port to one of the 4 jails at 70 and then 40%, opening a random 2 jails. Now, I do believe it's normalized in this case. We'd have the Fel Lord one first, followed by those kind of old god guys.
I actually think this is most people's least favorite boss for good reason, but once again, having a heavy melee comp's going to work well, and we can see that the Doggy's going to be instantly pulled here, so that's going to be some extra trash percentage. Team comps very well structured for that. And like you said, before we even dive into these mechanics, they all go down the elevator at the same time, and that kind of just, how synced up they are reminds me of just how even these teams really have been throughout this entire series. From the first map all the way to now, just looking very even throughout all of these. Now, let's jump into the action on Inquisitor.
Yeah, Tormentum's actually a bit lower on BDG's side, so they're pulling slightly ahead, and they do have, you know, trash is about evenly matched up. The big difference between the teams is really that Bloodlust timer, though I suspect it won't be a huge difference between them. They'll likely both end up using it on Ash Golem, depending on the optional boss order they do after Tormentum. As we alluded to earlier, Tormentum does start blinking to the second jail containing the Faceless ones for BDG. Pretty easy to deal with here. I mean, they immediately paralyze one of the casters on the side, group up the mobs on the other one, and cleave it down effectively. One of the other nice advantages of melee on this fight is the positioning in terms of dealing with those squiggly line eyes from the Inquisitor eyes in the middle of the room. It allows you to just keep full-time DPSing while just turning your camera enough so that you don't get disoriented from those eyes, something that is a bit of pain in the butt as a ranged or healer to do sometimes.
It really can be, but ultimately it is a lot easier to toe that squiggly line if you are a melee, and this is just another instance of why these heavy melee comps have been very good in this pool. So it's gonna, when we get over to the next boss, it's gonna be the same thing, especially if they are gonna go over to Glazer first. That is a boss that can be very annoying as range. Ash Golem, pretty easy for just about everyone. That's one of the reasons that we expect that heroism time to come in there, especially with the brittle phase that he is going to be putting out. That's just, you're getting more bang for your buck then, to be honest. But all of a sudden, we do see Team Omegasniped really catching up on the percentage. They're behind by just a mere 2%. They're gonna get it down, and once again, we got both of these teams exactly even on trash percentage. They get the boss down at virtually the same time. 0 deaths all around, and now they're going for the same darn trash pool as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how quickly Team Omegasniped really closed that gap on the boss there. They were trailing by a few percent, even the double digits of percent at some point. Nonetheless, they do pull some of these extra dogs. Now, there are Scorchers and Defilers in this group. The Scorchers are the ones that are a bit more dangerous. They explode for a substantial amount of damage on the group, especially if you kill a bunch of them at the same time. So you kind of want to, you know, tether which ones you're killing at what time. Defilers not as dangerous. Just got to interrupt that drain cast to make sure somebody doesn't get stun locked.
And you can see the doggos are just about ready to go down here. Now they got to make sure that they cut down the Shavara so they can get on over to that next boss. But for the most part, we are going to see, once this big baddie does fall, that they're pretty much done with trash until they get done with this next boss, and then they pretty much just need to take down the mobs that are going to be in front of that door. So Rogue's going to be crucial for getting the skips. This is where we start seeing cheeky stuff happen after these next 2 bosses. Keep that in the back of your mind. Now we are going to put all of our eyes on the one and only Glazer. I mentioned that this is one that is very annoying if you are ranged. They don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, and they also have the, once again, extra advantage of the melee with their positioning naturally being near the boss, because what happens is Glazer is going to shoot his big blue balls to the side of the room right now, and as soon as it connects with the wall, it will retarget and direct towards the closest player to that wall. The melee naturally being on top of Glazer will redirect his blue balls right back into his face and get some extra damage in on the boss as a result. Glazer stays up for about 40% at the start of the pull here before he goes into that immunity phase, as we're seeing for BDG side, where he will have to redirect the beam using those 5 statues right back into his bum. But first you have to destroy that Fel statue, because if the beam passes through that statue, it will pulse for the immense amount of damage and kill the group.
And the main thing is if you are one of the damage dealers, you don't want to have to deal with the blue balls, but you are going to see one of the DPS does go down, and that's one of the reasons, though, that it is so annoying with range, because you do need to be evading those those blue balls, and you're not able to stack on the boss as melee you inherently are, which is going to make those blue balls actually move towards the boss. So he's going to take that damage, but they make it through that mirror phase just fine, but this is going to be an extra 5 seconds for them, but they get that boss done just a tad earlier.
Just so fast. I mean, so much burst damage coming in. We didn't mention yet that once you shatter the shield on Glazer, he takes 100% increased damage for about 10 or 12 seconds, which just, I mean, you saw that death from above coming in for the Rogue, I think hitting for 7 or 8% of the boss's overall health. Both teams moving as quickly as they can over to Ash Golem, our resident Molten Giant, which is currently starting in a Frost phase and will get put back into that Brittle phase very quickly.
Yeah, we talk about basically how when you shatter that mirror, when Glazer is forced to see the reality of how ugly he truly is and he's being super self-conscious and taking increased damage, we're going to see a similar thing happen with Ash Golem, and that's this right on your screen now. This Brittle phase, he's going to be taking a massive amount of extra damage, and you can see Heroism is up for Team Omegasniped. This is their opportunity to pull ahead because Heroism's still on cooldown for Big Dumb Gaming, and now they have this Heroism up while they're doing increased damage, and we're going to see Ash Golem melt.
Yeah, I mean, both teams dealing with a nice, tall, frosty one right now. He does stay in that Brittle phase for 20 seconds, and it only takes 20% increased damage versus that 100% increased damage from that we saw over on Glazer. Both teams just doing an immense amount of damage. I mean, Melee's just so good at getting that burst in with their frequent access to their CDs, DFAs coming in. Ash Golem's still slightly ahead for Team Omegasniped, but that's what they want to see because they do have that 5-second deficit from that Death Rich, and with how close these teams are right now, that's going to be a huge factor by the end of it all.
And now we can see Ash Golem is out of the ice. He's now blazing. He is hot again. He is on fire. You have to deal with these fiery mechanics. For the most part, though, I'm going to be honest, it's not too difficult to deal with all the badness on the floor. The ads, for a large part, because they're able to do so much damage while he's chilling out, they don't have to deal with it nearly as much. Now they just need to race against the clock, bring down Ash Golem, and this Heroism does buy Team Omegasniped a little bit of time, but only 10% is going to be left for Big Dumb Gaming, and we already know that they had the same trash pull ahead of them, but they still have their Bloodlust. Is that going to be enough for Big Dumb Gaming to be able to close it out on Cordana? I
mean, we'll have to see. BDG right now says you're fired to Ash Golem as they finish him off, and they head upstairs. Both teams have the advantage, of course, of the Rogue with the mass stealth, being able to get not only past the Jailer that we see teams often get past, but also the Dreadlord initially kind of omitting that run back around near Glazer's room, which saves them a bunch of time. We see that CC going up immediately with the blind on the Jailer, and we see the Avalanche Potions, as expected, going down from both teams. Really favorable kind of spawn on the elevator there. I'm not sure all the players made it. I actually think they did. Where's the Rogue?
The Rogue did probably the most important piece as well, and we do know that there's some weird shenanigans that can really happen. Oh no.
Uh-oh.
Speaking of weird shenanigans, yeah, we got the biggest uh-oh moment here. This is enough to just that could be it. That could be the mistake that's just going to cause Big Dumb Gaming to be sent out of this tournament. We are going to look right now. We see that Team Omegasniped is going to lose their tank here, and so all right, any mistake here is just pretty difficult.
Think before you talk. I know there's a lot going on.
Everybody just died all at the same time, Ted. So the main thing is it is difficult to make sure that you time everything perfectly with that elevator when you actually do come down with the Avalanche Potion. You don't want to clip on anything because then you are basically going to be susceptible to fall damage again, right? So you want to make sure that you do time things right, that you want to get down as quickly as possible. But one of the most important things is you come out with this light right now, you got to deal with this ad, otherwise the door isn't going to open. And Luffy already, you can see Luffy running right through that wall. It's because Luffy wants to make sure he engages that RP to save as much time as possible, get that started as Team Omegasniped finishes up their trash. Now keep in mind, Big Dumb Gaming does have those 5 deaths. That's an additional 25 seconds. They have 15-second detriment when compared to Team Omegasniped.
Yeah, the key here is you really want to kill that Shade first because that's what's going to unlock the door and open the door to get to Cordana in the first place, allowing the healer to run out, start that RP while the players efficiently finish up the rest of the trash to 100% and get ready to go. We're seeing a bit of issue here for BDG as well as the tank starts to try and catch up to that area. All of them Avalanche Potion over to the back of the room there. Team Omegasniped has now started on Cordana. They don't have access to that Bloodlust, but they have an extra 25 seconds benefit by virtue of the deaths right now, and they've already started on her. Avatar has spawned at 75%. They're going to get Cordana out of her stealth soon, and they're going to grab the light right away.
You may have heard me for a second there saying, oh no, a couple times while Salute was saying smart stuff, but the main thing is Big Dumb Gaming has picked up another 2 deaths here. One was on their healer, the other was onto their monk. Now they are at that last trash pool. They're kind of out of danger. This isn't going to be a particular tough trash pool for them, and we should see their healer run ahead and activate the RP, the same that we saw earlier from Team Omegasniped, but they are very much in the back seat now. It is Team Omegasniped's match to throw, and we can see we're already at that halfway mark. We dealt with a lot of the mechanics. We're about to get to that intermission phase, Ted.
Yeah, the intermission phase lasts 40 seconds where Cordana is completely immune to damage. So the name of the game here is that players need to just dodge the walls by finding the gap in the wall as soon as it spawns. You kind of see a spark of where it is. You do reveal the wall with that light as well. So they just have to survive the 4 walls and then get, based on this camera angle, to the bottom statue just under that health bar, because that is where the shade of Cordana will spawn at the beginning. That will give a shield that immunes Cordana, and you can actually stun it, so you can efficiently cleave both of them. But the phase ends like Shauna Paul. They say, give me the light, and they throw it in the corner and get ready to cleave both of them down.
They got some good gaps there, too. They really didn't even have to move very much, and now they get to just instantly engage onto Cordana, and you can see them starting to move her over to a corner. The main reason that they're doing that is because we are going to see another Avatar of Vengeance come out. They know where that is. They want to be able to take it down, but this time they are just going to be doing massive amounts of damage onto Cordana Felsong, leaving that Avatar alone, and we have Big Dumb Gaming only at 70%. Team Omegasniped in this elimination match is going to win, sending home their opponents and moving on to play against Limit.
I mean, Rob, they proved that their counter pick was effective here, like you were alluding to.
Yeah, I mean, Team Omegasniped did pick this map, and that was certainly a factor when we think about this match format. This is what you want to do. You want to pick the map, you want to have success on it, and